Thank you very much for joining us. We're really happy to be able to give this presentation as a part of Open Access Week. There are a few people here joining me in the room in 1222, including two other presenters. So my name is Megan Hall, and I'm the Acting Director of Athabasca University Press. Currently still hold the role of Marketing and Production Coordinator as well. And then I have Kathy Killow to my right, who you can't see, and she's the Digital and Journals Coordinator. And then I also have Pamela Holloway, Senior Acquisitions Editor here at Athabasca University Press. Included in the room here are the other members of the press, so we're here to answer any questions from any portion of our operation, but also to dispel some of the myths and tell the truth about open access publishing here at AU and more broadly across the publishing environment. Just a couple of orders of business. We will be trying to record this presentation for sharing in other spaces. So that's just a warning that your questions or might appear as a part of that recording. And then I also had some how-tos about Skype for Business, but what do I know about that apparently? So I will not share those. I wanted to just begin the conversation by addressing, we'll sort of be going a piece at a time here, dealing with one issue at a time, one myth, and then dispelling it and sort of maybe replacing that myth with a truth about our process and about the way that things work in open access publishing. So it's been our experience that we've seen many people present on open access and talking about scholarly communications in general, including a report that was recently released by the Research Librarians of Canada. And I think it's important that after 10 years, Athabasca University Press is celebrating its 10-year anniversary this year. So we were founded in 2007. It's time for us to answer some of the questions right from our experience. In 10 years, we've learned a lot, and there's quite a bit that we would like to be able to share with our community. So to begin, possibly one of the more complicated elements is the issue of copyright and open access. So the myth that we sometimes hear circulating is the idea that open access books can be used in any way by the reader in any way that he or she wants, or that they want. I like this particular myth, because it allows us to kind of get into a bigger conversation about what use is and how we define open access. Even the definition of open access can sometimes be entering into some murky waters. For this talk and for the issues that we're hoping to discuss today, we're thinking about open access within the environment of literature. So we're talking about it within the publishing environment. So I particularly like this one quote that Peter Suber, the director of the Harvard Office of Scholarly Communication, says. He says, OA is about making something digital, online, free of charge, and free of most copyright and licensing restrictions. So I think it's important to understand the sort of intersection of free but also use. And that's where open access, there can be some division among different groups about what the definition of those words are. So we make our books digital, we post them on our website for download, and we add a Creative Commons license. So what's unique about this process, aside from making the book available at no charge, of course, is that it allows people to use the material in ways that were generally restricted by a traditional all rights reserved copyright license. As publishers of literature, we focus on extending permission to unrestricted reading, downloading, copying, sharing, storing, printing, searching, and linking. So these are the elements of usage that we're talking about for our titles. So the reason we, in most cases, assign that particular license, which is affectionately called CC by NC/ND, each of those is a component of the license that has certain definitions. So we'll break it down by each of these components. So the by component, which is attribution, means that the user of a work must properly attribute or identify the creator and anyone else designated as that should receive attribution. So in the case of our books, we ask that they acknowledge the publisher and that they acknowledge the author. In the case of NC or non-commercial, a user cannot use the work to commercial advantage. And then the final component, which is ND or no derivative, if a user remixes, transforms, or builds upon the work, they cannot distribute it. So you may, for personal use, build or transform a work, but you may not then take that work and distribute it to other users. I sometimes wish that those last two components, the NC and the ND portion, could be followed by the phrase without permission of the press. And the reason I think about it that way is that that's the real purpose of the license, is to keep the press, if use is happening outside the non-commercial or non-derivative, no derivative elements of the license, we'd really like to know about it. We may not necessarily deny someone the opportunity to translate a work or to create an audiobook from something that we are currently not distributing as an audiobook, but we do want to be made aware of what's happening, and then also check do some quality control on that product itself, and then we might be very well happy to sign away the permission to use the work in that way. But this protects the misuse of the work, and it allows us to stay in the communication loop about how that work is being used. And a final point about the use of open access books needs to touch on why AU Press and AU have chosen to support an open access mandate. So obviously OA is about reducing barriers to information, and also to increase access to that information. And I think this obviously has a striking correlation to our institution's own mandate, and we all know what it feels like when we're looking for something and we come up against a paywall, or we come up against some other kind of barrier to what we're actually hoping to find out, and it can be frustrating and it can limit our ability to know the thing we want to know. So the reasons that publishers put these limitations on their work, they can vary, but it could be that even you're looking in your library's holdings and they can't afford the subscription to a particular journal, and therefore it's not part of their holdings, or it could be you could be an independent scholar and not even have access to an institution's library and their holdings. So whatever the situation, whatever access barrier that you encounter, open access is hoping to address some of those. Have we addressed them all? By no means. There remain other kinds of barriers that people encounter when they're doing research and when they're looking for quality peer-reviewed information. But we're making some of those steps towards a more equitable system. So, of course, OA is looking to address the issues that scholars come across, but they're also looking to address issues that citizens are encountering when looking for good information. There's such an abundance of information out there that sometimes, looking in the university press holdings and being able to access that information that has, gone through a rigorous process is an important access barrier that we'd like to address. And finally, we ask ourselves quite often, who will read this book and who is this intended audience? And this gets at the question, or at the myth that I introduced earlier. And these are important questions to us as we shape content. But the reality and the truth is that our books are published and made available in an open access format for everyone and for anyone. And I think that gets at the real truth, which is that open access books are available to everyone. And that's the hope of our mission. So I will pass the microphone over, the laptop, over to Kathy Killow here, and she will introduce her concept.
Thank you, Megan. As Megan said, I'm Kathy Killow, and I am the Digital and Journals Coordinator for AU Press. And I'm going to talk about a few myths related to the production costs of digital products. So the first myth I want to talk a bit about is the one of digital objects don't cost anything to produce or are much cheaper to produce than print books. The truth is, books that are freely accessible online do not mean they are free to produce. All our books endure production costs for peer review, editing, and design. The only difference in the publication cost between the print and digital is in the creation of the final product. So therefore, the cost differences between the print format and the digital format is the cost of printing and shipping for the print edition and the cost for the creation of the various digital formats, such as in the Kindles and the EPUB files. The second myth related to open access books and open educational resources is that they're the same thing. And this kind of builds on what Megan was talking about. So in the realm of publishing, open educational resources can be described as a subset of open access. That is, open educational resources are always seen as open access material, but not all open access publications may be considered as an open educational resource. And the difference is mainly in the licensing for their use. The reason for this is that open educational resources are designed for education and teaching purposes, thus lending themselves to reuse and derivatives. This results in broader license for their use as an open educational resource. Open access scholarly publications are not always intended for educational or teaching materials, but are often scholarly works that include third-party copyrighted material and include lengthy sustained arguments that are not suitable for derivatives. This usually results in more restrictive license for their use. And this is one myth or misconception people have about why our books cannot have a more liberal license. And many of our publications have third-party copyrighted material, and we can't turn around and then provide a license for the reuse of that material or for derivative uses of it. So that's why generally many of our publications have a more restrictive Creative Commons license put on them. The third myth I want to talk about is open access publishing means digital-only publishing. Many people misunderstand and have a misconception that our press is a digital publisher only. Open access publications are distributed as digital objects. However, these publications can also take many other formats. The digital is just one of them. All AU Press publications are available in print, as well as in a variety of digital formats. Having this variety allows the reader choice in accessing a variety of editions, ones that suits them for their preferences or their needs. Let's see, the last myth I want to touch on is open access means no revenue. And an open access publication that's freely available from our website is only one single way to deliver a format of our publication. AU Press generates revenue through a hybrid distribution model. So that is, our open access PDFs are available to read for free from our website, while other digital formats, such as EPUBs and Kindles, are available for purchase through online bookstores and through library purchases. Our print formats are also available for sale through national and international booksellers. Publishing these multiple formats allows for the penetration of the publication in numerous markets, which enables the content to be more easily found and also creates a revenue stream that helps to subsidize our publishing program. It's important to note that approximately 80% of our sales revenue comes from the sale of print editions. So there's another myth out there that the print book is dead, or people are only wanting to read online. And our sales revenue is definitely showing that there is a demand for print. And if we didn't provide a print edition, we'd be not serving our customers properly. So in conclusion, open access publishing does cost money. And for AU Press and our publishing model, there is an opportunity to realize revenue through the sale of alternate formats. So I think that is it, and hopefully that some of the points that I raised will create some questions and provide for some discussion during our Q&A session at the end. And now I'll pass the laptop over to Pamela.
Pass Pamela over to the laptop. Hi, everybody. I'm Pamela Holloway. I'm the senior editor for acquisitions at AU Press. And it falls to me to address the topic of quality, a word that we're hearing a lot about these days. The basic myth here is very simple. Something that's available for free can't possibly be as good as something that costs money. A price tag is, after all, our culture's way of communicating value, And the assumption is that the more expensive something is, the better it must be, right? So this is the myth that open access challenges. I think to explore the whole issue of quality, I think it helps to start by considering what the difference is between dissemination, that is just making something available, and publishing in the sense of the term that we usually use. Is this? Yeah. Publishing is like, as Kathy said, publishing is a subset of dissemination. Anyone can write something, slap it up on the web. That's dissemination. In fact, the web is simply a vast reservoir of open access materials. Now, the vast majority of those materials would never pass muster with a publisher. Publishers are selective, and they're often accused these days of being gatekeepers. And the assumption here seems to be that it would be better to simply disseminate everything willy-nilly, no matter what, and then leave it to the reader, the user, to sort through the wheat and the chaff and decide what is of value, or what they like, as the case may be. The problem with this course is that it puts the reader to a lot of work. And of course, authors who, especially in an academic job market, authors who are up for tenure or promotion, writers who want to establish themselves as major literary voices, they actually want some sort of third-party approval of their work. So that's where publishers come in. If you have something accepted for publication, this says something about the quality, the presumed quality of that material. Now, what it says is a function of the publisher's reputation. Publishers become associated, they're judged by what they publish, and that judgment becomes associated with their imprint, that is their name. And so a book that is published by such and such a publisher is presumed to have a certain level of quality. Put this simply, if somebody buys a Harlequin romance, they're probably not expecting great literature. Somebody buys a novel that was just released by New West Press here in Edmonton, they are actually expecting that it will have been very carefully selected by the editors at New West, who deem that it is worthy of their imprint. And in the same way, scholarly presses are judged by the quality of what they publish. So what exactly then does quality mean? Quality, of course, can be assessed in all sorts of different ways, but I think it's helpful to think of sort of three main axes, if you can have three axes. One of them is substantive content. So in the case of an academic book, is the scholarship sound? Are the ideas in the book new and interesting? Are the arguments well thought through, well supported? Does the book advance our understanding of a topic that is of importance in a given field of study? And the standard way to assess such substantive issues is the peer review process. I think it's important to understand that absolutely no necessary relationship exists between peer review and open access. Most open access journals practice peer review. I would say that probably all university presses that publish open access books practice peer review. The question really is, what is the rigor of the peer review process? A publisher could get a manuscript, send it to a couple of the author's best friends, and then announce that they've practiced peer review. But if a publisher is interested in protecting its imprint, protecting its reputation, they will take care to select external readers very carefully, make sure that they are people who are well positioned to comment on the substance of the book. They will also make sure to eliminate any possible conflicts of interest. and also they'll read the reports that they receive critically, and, you know, so in other words, that's genuine peer review. In addition, in fact, I would guess virtually all university presses have editorial boards. Decisions about publication are not made by editors at the press. I don't get to decide whether we're going to publish something or not. That decision is made by our editorial board or editorial committee, which is made up of scholars. And the point of having the job of an editorial board is to function as a check on the press's acquisitions staff, and to make sure that the press isn't going to publish anything that might in some way jeopardize the quality of its imprint. And editorial boards do this by reading some or all of the manuscript, by reading the reader's reports, reading the author's response to the reader's reports, often by cross-examining the press's acquisitions editor, and you know, so that's another level of quality control that university presses put in place. And again, all of these processes exist completely independently of the means by which the final product is going to be distributed. So the second aspect of quality is, of course, editorial. Most publishers provide some sort of editing, but for reasons of cost, a lot of publishers these days aren't doing more than sort of mechanical editing. They want a copy editor who will fix authors' mistakes and tidy up their incredibly sloppily prepared references. And this makes the author look better, and it also helps to protect the press's imprint. They also want the copy editor to impose a consistent editorial style on the book, because that makes the publisher look like a more professional operation and protects their imprint. But often that's really about the extent of it. We here at AU Press go a step beyond that. We want editors to engage with the content of what they're reading. I think the most important job of an editor is to ensure that a text communicates meaning clearly. This is something that is there for the benefit of the reader, who often kind of gets left out of the equation. We want to be sure that the books we publish don't have sentences in them that need to be decoded, or paragraphs that wander gaily all over the place, or other such problems. In other words, we adhere to very high editorial standards, and we are an open access press. Finally, the last dimension to quality is presentation. What does the book look like? This is of less concern to EPUB files, which are ugly no matter what you do with them. But in the case of the printed book, it's an object, and it wants to adhere to certain standards of production. Attention generally focuses on book jackets or covers. Are they visually striking and whatnot? Covers are basically there for the purpose of marketing the book. But from the standpoint of the reader, what is more important is the interior design of the book. A well-designed book is easy on the eye. It helps. The design. It may have some flourishes, zippy chapter openings or something, but its basic function is to support reading. But what most readers are oblivious to is that there are a ton of rules, so-called, that govern good page makeup. And as I say, most readers have no reason to be aware of what these are, but publishers know about them. So if I open a book and the first thing I see is a broadside table, broadside means you have to turn the book, and it's on a right-hand page. Or if I see a subhead and there's only one line of text underneath it, my first thought is, unprofessional publishing, typesetting. So that's another dimension of quality that is often somewhat invisible to readers, but is very much there and very much contributes to the press's reputation. So in closing, I just want to say that, the American Association of University Presses, which Canadian university presses mostly belong to, has a huge cover, jacket, and interior book design award every year. And the Book Publishers Association of Alberta also has awards. And we have won awards from both of them. Editing awards are a lot less common because assessing the quality of editing is quite a complicated and time-consuming task, but the BPAA, bless its heart, does offer an editing award, and we have won it twice in the past several years. And we're an open access press. I've been a staunch supporter of open access right from the very beginning. It's the reason I joined AU Press. And my goal has always been to prove that open access does not in any way, shape, or form imply lower quality. The quality of a publication is a function of many things, but whether a book or journal is open access or not should never be one of them. Thank you.
So I'm just glancing at the clock here, and I do want to have time to take people's questions, which I think we'll have to do over the chat box. Luckily we have Karen Wislink here to do our moderating of the chat box, so she'll help with that aspect. I'm going to present the last piece here, which is a rather simple one actually. So, and that's about market. Because there's often the claim made that open access material is more discoverable than traditional forms of publishing. And all you have to do is think about what Pamela was saying about the enormity of content that's available on the internet, and how simply posting something in an institutional repository or some other space on the internet does not guarantee that anyone will be able to find it. And so that is one of the, I think, important, well, perhaps I'm from a marketing background and therefore I deem it more important, but I do think that the vehicle of a university press and the traditional publishing process has the ability to increase the discoverability of open access material, because that is of paramount importance to us as publishers, that we finally reach the reader that the book is intended to speak to. And so each publication here at AU Press is made open access, but is also given a unique marketing plan, and then that material, whether it's in an open access format or in another digital format or a print format, receives wide distribution, a worldwide distribution to markets, to every market that we're able to access. And I think this is an important element that somehow gets looked over as we talk about dissemination, and we imagine that the internet is capable of all things, but we still need to draw attention to the material that is being published, to the uniqueness of what's being of arguments, and also to think about how publishers optimize their websites, they optimize their metadata that goes along with their publications to draw attention to the material that's in fact being published and being made public. I think that we've all experienced clicking on that link that's dead, and being promised something on the other end of a link that would be the perfect, that is going to be the perfect resource. But so often those things move and they disappear, and a university press is invested in keeping all of those connections alive, and that's part of making material discoverable and maintaining access to it, which is of course something that we're committed to as well. So I think the truth there is that open access material can raise the profile of research and ideas, but only when actively disseminated. So I think that brings us to the question period, and Pamela and Kathy are here to address questions that they on the topics that they spoke on, or it's simply you can address them to whomever. I don't know if we have anything in the chat box materializing.
Not yet.
I have some people planted with questions. So for those that are planted with questions, feel free to rise at any moment. But if you, we'll give you a minute to form your thoughts.
With APCs.
Oh yeah.
Do I need to turn this on?
We have a question in the room, and of course we have no audio in the room,
Oh,
so
is it-
no, you don't have to turn it on.
Oh,
I will
right.
just translate for you.
Well, when Kathy was touching on like the hybrid, what was it, the hybrid distribution model. The reason why I came here is because I'm interested in kind of self-publishing but going through an open access kind of
Right.
venue.
We're talking about hybrid distribution models and open access venues.
And I still can't wrap my head around beyond the 80% of the publications going to print, which generates revenue.
Mhm.
How does open access kind of, the meaning transfer over to marketable, money-making publications?
So are you sort of, I think the question is about how does, oh, I'm gonna misinterpret you, but that's standard, right, when someone reads the question. I think the question is about what is the business sort of proposal there with open access publications when 80% of, when you're pursuing
Sure.
multiple models, and so how does the ethos of open access extend to those other?
Yeah, more or less, it's like,
Format?
I mean, just,
Do you wanna come and speak into the mic? Would that be better? No,
it's fine.
okay.
I just mean like, etymologically, just open access, just to me, and I think to most people, it just means freely accessible publications or information or works.
Right,
Yet, we are here talking about a marketable model based on that freedom
Sure.
that is going to actually generate money.
mm-hmm,
And I'm just wondering how,
Okay.
beyond the hybrid model, beyond being able to produce hard copy printable materials
Yeah.
from that stuff.
yeah.
So how is it just based on credibility? Is that's how you can generate those funds just from digitally produced material? Or how else can you do it? Like, let's say if I'm doing
So we're talking about different possible ways to make money through an open access
right,
model.
like let's say in general, let's say I come up with this a kick-ass literary journal or an idea for one.
Sure, yeah.
And then I present it to AU Press or some other open access academic press.
Yeah.
How would I market myself to have you guys market these things online?
Sure.
Open access, which to me constitutes free material,
Mhm.
yet still be able to talk my way into getting paid, getting revenue for the material that I produce that you guys back up.
Yeah. So I think the question is how do we sustain ourselves in this model, and how does the money function? How do you pay the creators? How do you continue to pass money around in a system like that? So is it sustainable
Without
revenue,
Without
without
printing.
print?
Right.
I think nobody, here at AU Press, we are generously supported by AU, and that's how we make it work. The revenue that we get from our various funders, whether they're provincial or they're federal or they're title funding or they're SHRC grants for journals, they don't make up the difference of what it costs to publish. So without the support of Athabasca University and its endorsement of our model, and the pursuit of that model, we simply could not make that material available for free, because there isn't really a business proposal
Right.
that makes sense, which is why other university presses are very nervous about the model becoming the norm, is because the only reason Athabasca University Press can do it is because Athabasca University makes it so. And if you're talking about University of Toronto Press with hundreds of books coming out in a given year, and the costs maybe associated with making that material available open access without institutional support, it probably could not be done.
Right.
So I think there is a gap, there's a hole in the model right now, right, where everyone's talking about open access as if, and I think we all want to pursue open access because we can see what the benefits are. But as of yet, I think people sort of refuse to acknowledge some of the actual financial implications of that model. And we try to get involved in that discussion quite often because there are realities associated with open access publishing, which is part of what we're trying to do here today, is to sort of expose some of those realities and start having discussions about how we do this. If we want all material that is peer reviewed and coming out of university presses, if we want it all to be accessible, what would that actually look like? Because these things, like we said, the digital objects cost nearly as much money as the print object. So the digital object is no less expensive than the print object. And I think that was the original idea with open access. Well, these digital objects, they're just free. But if you want to, if these are peer-reviewed objects with, high-quality editorial and production values, then all of those costs are also make up that digital object that we're disseminating. So
beyond that dissemination, beyond information sharing, what did you guys at AU Press, what did you hope to glean from this? What is the ultimate end game to this discussion?
To the open access discussion?
Yes.
From the perspective of a university press, I mean, I actually think a diversity of models is acceptable. I'm not certain that I think all university presses should pursue this model. Is it the answer for all kinds of material? Does all material work best in an open access model? I'm not absolutely certain. I certainly wouldn't want to push it on any other university press and say, this is the way this is the way that things are moving forward, and clearly this is, ethically, we often hear that the argument that this is public money being invested in research, then the results of which should be made publicly available. That's sort of an argument you hear very often in these conversations. And I think the truth of the matter is it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Good.
So, yeah.
Hi, this is Pamela. I just wanted to add something. I think it's important to understand the distinction here between scholarly materials and, say, literature.
Mm-hmm.
Most authors of scholarly materials are not attempting to earn their living by royalties from their publications. And so, we don't need commercial publishing, especially of fiction, is a completely different animal. I cannot actually imagine an open access model working very well for literature. Because the fact of the matter is, it costs us, this is probably an outdated figure, but I used to say probably somewhere between $15,000 and $18,000 to produce a book. And I don't believe that includes overhead.
Yeah.
So, that's a lot of money. And that money has to come from somewhere. So if we simply don't print a book, and if we, just put our PDFs on the website, we have no revenue stream. So that's it. Open access doesn't work. However, at least at the moment, a lot of people are, we're alive and floating. Our books actually sell as well as any other scholarly book in Canada, which is, believe me, not saying very much. So it's not, we have to find some way of making it work. One way that a lot of journals especially, but I've also seen monograph presses are finding a way to make it work, is to make the author pay for it. There's a thing called author processing charges. And the myth that's been created here is that somehow open access publishing is more expensive than regular publishing, which is, complete nonsense. What basically happened is open access journals that didn't want to produce print copies of their journals therefore had no revenue stream. So obvious solution is to tell the author, we'll publish your article if you give us $2,000. Cambridge University Press will publish your entire book open access in exchange for £12,000, which is $16,000, something like that. I would never, ever, ever tell an author to pay that. That's just, it's highway robbery. What they're basically doing is making the author cover all of the production costs. And so open access, which was founded as a way to lower barriers, to make things available to people. Just because we sell our book doesn't mean that it isn't freely available. We're simply doing that in order to stay alive. But we don't turn around and say, well, okay, we'll publish it open access. And of course, Cambridge still has the rights to print the book and sell it. But that the author gets to foot the bill. That's not, to my mind, an acceptable solution. My soapbox.
But I think it brings up really interesting questions that we deal with all the time, and how will this model
Yeah.
mature, and what will it look like in 10 years? What will be the new standards? You know, the Tri-Agency Council of Canada made recommendations about publishing their federally funded research as in an open access format. So there's a changing sort of expectation around how to make that information available, or that research available. So I think we're in the midst of that discussion. Certainly we don't have any answers for all people. We have the answers for ourselves.
Some answers.
Some answers, true enough. Any other things coming across? Would you like to ask your planted question then? I suppose we answered it.
I think it was answered. It
Yeah.
was, should all university presses be open access presses?
Yeah, so the question I planted with Karen is, should all university presses be open access presses? And I think there is a lot of university presses are feeling a lot of pressure to take a look at this model. You know, 10 years ago when AU Press came onto the scene, I was not here, but Kathy was, and several other people here who are still at AU Press were here. And this was really breaking new ground and talking about things and pushing our understanding of how to make material available, and how to what's the business proposition for that, and how do you make it work, and how do you access all of the different modes of delivery. And so there were a lot of questions to be asked, and I think you know, now 10 years in, we have several other university presses exploring this model alongside us, and another one sort of coming online in 2018 that's with an open access mandate. So it certainly has caught on as a method or as a publishing model, but there are a lot of questions that remain to be answered, and I think and I think we cannot assume that it is a one-size-fits-all model. In fact, we feel very privileged to be working in this model and to be exploring it and taking on these issues, but we don't necessarily. We certainly understand the concerns that other university presses express. So, with that, I think we'll close the session. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I apologize for the lack of video conferencing. It would have been a more dynamic presentation had we been able to be here all together in the room. But I appreciate you joining us nonetheless, and hopefully this will just begin the conversation about open access and AU Press here at AU. Okay, thanks everyone.